Warning: the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, the world's most exciting podcast, The Savage Nation, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
You know, it's strange. Two people that I know, one very well and one somewhat well, who I've lost touch with, died in the last 24 hours. And I had inklings of their deaths prior to the actual announcements before them. I have another friend who I was speaking with on the phone the other night, and I mentioned Lawrence Ferlinghetti to him in some passing way. He never heard of him. Now, this friend of mine is a very important member of the media from another generation. I said something about Ferlinghetti. I don't know what it was. I knew him years ago in the San Francisco area, and I do remember now. I said, yes, he stopped on the way to the Adelaide Arts Festival and stayed with us in Honolulu, and we shipped our Volkswagen van over to the Big Island, and we took him around the Big Island, and then he came back to Honolulu, and then he flew to Adelaide. The next day, he dies. Now, the same man is getting on an airplane yesterday, my friend, and he said, it's a night flight. I don't want to take it. I don't feel good about it. I'm getting, just a bad feeling. I said, you're having an anxiety attack taking a night flight. Why are you doing it? And I just casually said, I have a friend. I haven't seen him in a while because he's been sick, named Dr. Richard Kunin, who wrote a book many years ago called The Listen to Your Body Diet. And I said, you ought to listen to your body and not go on that plane. That's all I said. Now, I wake up this morning and I get a note from another friend, Dr. Kunin has died. So I've had inklings about people's tragedies or deaths before they happen all of my life. I'm not a guru, but I have certain sensitivities and senses about things. I want to talk today about A Tale of Two Deaths because Richard Kunin was a very important man in my life. I've lost touch with him because he's been quite sickly and moved out of the area. But it's worthy of your attention because he is in many ways the brick foundation upon which all of modern nutrition stands. Now, there were others before him. But Dr. Richard Kunin, MD, is a giant in the field of nutritional medicine, and most people don't know who he is. He has many firsts, many firsts. Let me go back for a minute. His name is Kunin. He used to say to me when I first met him, he said, it's pronounced as onion, Richard Kunin, MD. And you talk about white privilege. He really had white privilege, You want to hear about his father? His father had to flee Russia at age 13 by walking out of Russia through China to a port city and then take a ship to San Francisco. That was the white privilege that he had. Now, it's an interesting story. Richard's father, who I never met because his father passed away rather young from a heart attack, as did my father. Remember, the boy is 13 years old. He's about to be conscripted into the Russian military. He doesn't want to go because he knows he's going to be cannon fodder. He chooses to walk out of Russia, across Russia, through China, to a port city. It takes a ship to San Francisco where he had a relative, and he takes a job as a humble barber. And at the end of his life, he owned 1,300 or 1,700 salons or barbershops, which eventually was sold to Supercuts. That's an example of white privilege, for those of you who want to know a little bit about the politics. But getting back to Richard, how did I meet Dr. Kunin? 1978, I received my PhD from the University of California at Berkeley in human nutrition epidemiology. And it was tough sledding. I was ahead of my time. There were no jobs, especially since I wasn't a woman or a minority or a transgender or an illegal alien. I couldn't get a teaching position, even though I was the author of 6 published books and a great PhD and 2 master's degrees. So I found myself with a group of men and women who were known as the Orthomolecular Medical Society, which Richard ran. He ran this. So Richard, I got to know him well. I remember a friend of mine said, why don't you come to his house? We have Tuesday night meetings of doctors who are all very advanced thinkers And they're all, in a way, outcasts from the medical establishment, but they really have great ideas. And it was right up my alley. So I remember going up to his house. He lived in a huge mansion on Pacific Avenue in Pacific Heights. I mean, I'm talking about a majorly beautiful mansion, furnished beautifully. Met him and his wife, Matilda, his son, Greg. And every Tuesday night, there would be a soiree of doctors, scientists, talking about ideas in nutrition. And that's where I really got to know Richard well. I got to know him very well over the years. His Christmas parties were famous. Matilda's parties were famous. Matilda also created a little children's theater society, beautiful children's society in honor of their son who died, Tony, from a tragic accident when he was young. Richard had terrible tragedy in his life. He lost his young son to a freak accident, and he always had a smile. He always had a smile for you. And Richard was a man who had many firsts. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself because it's going to be about nutrition and what Dr. Kunin did as the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine, and then the Society for Orthomolecular Health Medicine, a medical education society, and a memorial to Linus Pauling, who I met through him, by the way. Linus Pauling, a great, great genius. So getting back to Dr. Kunin, and one of the things in his house that I found very odd, which I'd never seen before, was in his kitchen, big kitchen, old-fashioned kitchen, there was a cabinet, and I needed some vitamin C that night for one reason. He opened the cabinet. It was filled with nutritional supplements. The whole cabinet was filled with them. It was like a drugstore. I had never seen that in a house. Well, if you come to my house, I have a cabinet filled with vitamins, minerals, and herbs. If you go to my son's house, you'll see a cabinet filled with vitamins, minerals, and herbs. And we owe that little personal nutritional pharmacy to Dr. Kunin. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ralph Waldo Emerson said something. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. That's Dr. Kunin. And he was a great teacher to me in many ways. So going back to 1978, I get my new PhD. They won't hire me, even though I'm a pioneer in my own field with many published books. And I started to hang out with Richard and the guys at the OMS. And then they put on a big conference. In those days, it was a very exciting time in nutritional medicine. They put on a huge conference at the Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles, and Richard invited me to give a speech. I wish I had the copy of the speech. I don't have it. And it got me off a real bad depression of feeling, out of it. After all these years of hard work, I get my union card and they won't hire me. Well, okay, I was hired for my mind where it mattered. So let's go back again. Dr. Kunin's lists of firsts. In 1964, now remember, Dr. Kunin has an MD and he was trained in psychiatry. Let me start with that. He was trained in psychiatry at a major medical school. 1964, Time magazine featured him in its article, Head to Toe Hypnosis. He was a hypnotist as well. And he was the first doctor who developed the neurophysiological approach to medical hypnosis, which became a basis for a more scientific method of psychotherapy. 1969, he originated the mental tune-up, a therapy based on linguistics and mood training hypnosis. Think about how advanced that was. 1972, Prevention magazine wrote about Dr. Kunin in an article entitled, He Cures Psychiatric Disorders with Nutrition. You hear this? He was the first person to combine computer, diet, vitamin and mineral testing, and hypnotherapy, which became the prototype of holistic medicine practiced by many doctors around the world. Again, he's unknown. If you mention his name, people don't know who he is. You may have heard the word holistic. Before this word was in use, Dr. K had integrated hypnosis, behavior therapy, and orthomolecular medicine and psychiatry into a model of general medical practice. In 1974, his research into mineral metabolism led to his discovery that manganese treatment is successful in treating drug-induced tardive dyskinesia. Think about that. 1974, he was studying mineral metabolism, and he discovered that manganese treatment is successful in treating drug-induced tardive dyskinesia. This was a demonstration that mineral therapy worked, and it was a time when most medical authorities were united against nutrition therapy. They called anyone in nutrition a quack. Think about that. In 1975, Dr. K was the first person to discover that aspirin blocks the skin flush response to vitamin B3 or niacin. You know, if you take niacin, high doses of niacin to lower cholesterol, you get a skin flush. Kunin discovered that aspirin blocks the skin flush. He then offered the suggestion that the anti-schizophrenic action of niacin, well established by Dr. Hoffer, is related to prostaglandins. 1976, he was the first to introduce an individualized diet method based upon mood and energy effects, which he called the orthocarbohydrate diet. That year, he co-founded the Orthomolecular Medical Society, of which he was also president from 79 to 81. Remember, I met him in 78. He wrote a book in those years called Mega Nutrition. His best-selling book, Mega Nutrition, 1980. And that launched the Listen to Your Body diet. Remember I told you a friend wrote Listen to Your Body diet? It was a method that he described of balancing dietary carbohydrate, fat, and protein according to one's individual needs. He wrote other nutritional books that were big hits. Mega Nutrition for Women, and that helped to define the role of orthomolecular nutrition in general medical practice, which many, many doctors are practicing today. In 1987, Dr. K developed the first cure for autism. I'm going to repeat that. In 1987, Dr. K developed the first cure for autism that was due to thalassemia minor, which is a genetic disease dramatically helped by nutrition therapy. Again, your doctors may not know this. If you want to know more about it, look into the President's Commission on Mental Retardation and Mental Illness, Washington, D.C., 1988. In 1988, he followed this up by being the first to identify the effect of DMAE on MAO, linking induced MAO to treatment benefits. Now, here's a big one coming up. Those of you who are into the specifics on nutrition, and we're talking about my memoriam to my good friend, Dr. Richard Kunin, who passed away the other day. In 1990, he achieved the first measurement of EPA. We've all heard about EPA, right? What is EPA? EPA is found in fish oils. But EPA is a long-chain omega-3 oil that is found in snake oil. Did you hear this? Remember you heard about snake oil? Oh, he's selling snake oil. It turns out that Richard discovered that snake oil has powerful anti-inflammatory benefits due to the anti-leukotriene B4 action of EPA, the long-chain omega-3 oil. This was actually an historic first, since he showed that snake oil is not quackery after all. It gets even more interesting. His list of firsts continues. 1993, Dr. K was the first interim president of the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine in Toronto. The next year, he was the first to identify carnitine deficiency with myasthenia as being due to valproic acid and aspirin. He then founded the Society for Orthomolecular Health Medicine. That was an educational society and a memorial to Linus Pauling. Again, these organizations paved the way for medical practice, which is still being followed today. And if you're seeing a doctor who practices with nutraceuticals, you should know, is the godfather of all of this. In 1996, Dr. K was the first to measure fluoride in hair, and he demonstrated that hair levels of up to 20 parts per million in an outpatient population existed, and that provided further evidence of major public health problems with fluoride. He was totally opposed to the fluoridation of water, by the way. Listen to this. 3 years later, 1999, he was the first to develop and publicize the idea that linked autism to ischemia and neurological damage triggered by nutrient deficiency, toxicity, and vaccine activation of coagulation. Vaccine activation of coagulation. In 2001, he was the first to propose that megavitamins work as anticoagulants, not just as antioxidants with anti-inflammatory effects. Megavitamins work as anticoagulants. Same year, Dr. K was among the first to identify vitamin K deficiency syndrome, including osteoporosis, periodontal disease, inflammatory bowel disease, pancreatic disease, carpal tunnel syndrome, osteoarthritis, TMJ disease, all as a common factor in delayed healing. In 2003, Dr. K was the first to identify the most important epidemic of our time, the genetic epidemic. What does that mean? He discovered the mutation rate in 150 consecutive patients to be unexpectedly high. Unexpectedly high. MTHFR, folate reductase, was over 90% mutated, and methionine synthase, MTR, and MTRR was over 95% mutated. What does this mean? Well, it's too complicated, but it's important for you to know that this is a doctor, a great doctor, who had many firsts. He was ahead of his time, and he's now completely unknown except amongst those who remember what he did. So what was Dr. Kunin's background? MD, 1955, University of Minnesota. Following psychiatric residency training at New York Hospital, Payne Whitney Clinic, which he completed in 1959, he served for 2 years in the United States Army Medical Corps with the 7th Division at the DMZ and the 121 Evac Hospital in Korea, and later at Valley Forge Army Hospital in Pennsylvania. Think about that. Think about how long ago that was. I remember going into his beautiful big home and going upstairs, and hanging from the top of the steps was a tapestry, a phenomenally great piece of art. And I said, Richard, where'd this come from? He said, oh, this is from Korea, which he got in the early 50s. In 1962, he was awarded an NIH postdoc fellowship in neurophysiology at Stanford University Medical Center. Dr. Kunin's depth electrode studies documented hippocampal theta rhythm changes in animal hypnosis. It means that hypnosis caused changes in the brain. And this research, when applied to human hypnosis, led to his appointment as a consultant in behavior therapy at Stanford in the Department of Psychology. He was also appointed lecturer in hypnosis at the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco. 1970, he was elected president of the San Francisco Academy of Hypnosis, which is actually a professional education society. Now, what's very interesting is that he was reviled by the medical establishment, although he had great training, high degree in medicine. Because he went into nutrition, he was considered sort of out of it, a quack, right? And it's very sad because the man was ahead of his time. He's a very important part not only of medicine, but of nutrition. Very, very important part of that. A few years ago, his wonderful wife, Matilda, of many years, created the San Francisco Young Performers Theater in his memory, the memory of their young son who died in a freak accident. They put on stage plays. I went to many of them. Matilda also established a theater and education project funded by the Haas Foundation and so forth and so on. They're wonderful people. So Dr. Kunin, before he became ill and just passed away, was still practicing a health medicine strategy for people who came to see him from around the world using megadose vitamin therapies, which of course generated controversy even now. But for example, do you take mega doses of vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin B6, B12, folic acid, and many bioflavonoids? I do. They're all directly or indirectly antioxidant. But he discovered they're also anticoagulants. In fact, megavitamins hold the key to blood flow. And he said blood flow is the key to cellular nutrition. Because as we know, reduced blood flow can cause free radicals, inflammation, and cell death within 4 hours. This is very important. You have to understand how important his work really was. He also was a pioneer in biochemical individuality. And he pioneered that with Dr. Roger Williams 40 years ago. And he practiced it. He practiced it with doctor friends of his. Treated many different illnesses. He was a public advocate in many ways. And those are some of the things that I thought you should know about Dr. Richard Kunin, my dear, dear friend, who just passed away the other day. And I want to say again, he really is the foundation upon which almost all nutrition medicine today is practiced. He is the brick foundation upon which all the doctors who practice nutritional medicine now stand. Now, unfortunately, because of COVID, there cannot be a funeral, which is really tragic in so many different ways, because I would have given a eulogy that would have been a lot shorter than that I just gave you on this podcast, and it would have been more about the personal relationship I had with Richard. because I knew him as a friend. And I had a lot of down days in my life. And, you know, despite the tragedy this man suffered, losing a young child to a freak accident, he always had a smile for everyone. Richard always had a smile for you. And all I could say is, Richard, thank you for everything.
Michael Savage, a host like no other.
Well, what's the news of the day? American Airlines doesn't deny pilot spotting UFO over New Mexico. Ho-hum. FAA declining to hand over any more information about a UFO. FBI is aware of it. Pentagon beaming power from space. So, what do I care about UFOs for right now? We have enough UFOs flying inside Washington, D.C., inside the White House. Unidentified flying objects inside there. These leftists may as well be from Mars. So why am I so concerned about UFOs again? Why is this coming up? Manhattan DA gets Trump taxes millions of pages. Well, they're trying to nail him to a cross. I guess they won't stop. Lady Gaga's dog walker shot 4 times by men who stole 2 of Singer's dogs. I guess that's front page news, Lady Gaga's dog. 38% of Americans would give up sex for a year just to travel again. Okay, no comment. The COVID variant is spreading fast in New York City. Vaccine makers studying a 3rd booster shot. Sure, there's plenty of money. Why not 10 booster shots? Even though the rate of disease is dropping like a rock, the mortality rate is dropping like a rock. Why not come up with new booster shots every other week? Think of the money. You know there's money involved in medicine, don't you? Here's a sad story. Israel has forgotten its own past and has permitted the names of the unvaccinated to be shared with others so they can shame them. This is Israel now? Why don't they now move to the... no, I don't want to say it because this is shocking. They forgot their own past? Okay, my friends, it's getting worse by the day. Israeli nuke facility undergoes major project. Who cares? I'm not really interested. This story about Cuomo is big because it's no longer about the nursing homes. The headline in the New York Post is Cuomo's a pig. Governor kissed me. He suggested strip poker, said a former aide. Joked with her about playing strip poker, kissed her on lips without warning. So, well, what can I say? If anything is going to get Governor Meatball cooked and overcooked, it's the kiss job.
We had a great tradition on Sundays. The family had to come together at the table. You had to be there. They called it dinner, but it started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was somewhere in the, I don't really know why they called it dinner, but everybody was at the table. Spaghetti and meatballs every Sunday. I started my tomato sauce before I left. We're going to go back. We're going to sit at the table. Have our spaghetti and meatballs on Sunday.
I guess the Me Too movement has finally hit him. Let's play strip poker, my story of working with Governor Cuomo by former aide Lindsey Bolin. You know, this is frightening because how far back did they go? Remember the folk group Peter, Paul, and Mary? Well, one of them is named Peter Yarrow. I don't know how old he is, 85. I just don't know. He was just accused of raping an underage girl in a New York City hotel room in 1969. How far back can they go with this? Peter, Paul, and Mary's Peter, accused of raping an underage girl in a New York City hotel in 1969? How do I know if it's true or false? Shouldn't there be a statute of limitations on these claims, as there are with all other crimes? I guess. Because I guess someone could accuse Jesus of inappropriate behavior at some point. Crazy. California to pass a bill recognizing all products as gender neutral. Meanwhile, Biden has chosen a China chief, you're not going to believe this story, who says it's fine with the Communist Party of China spreading influence in America. She also pre-briefed communists ahead of a major summit. I guess you don't care, though, because you're more interested in LGBT and BLM, right? Sad, just sad. You can find many of these stories on michaelsavage.com if you have the desire to torture yourself and read more about them. I read a story here about a man who was thrown off his wheelchair by men, unidentified men. He's thrown off his wheelchair, and his wheelchair robbed by 3 of them, beat him up and robbed his wheelchair. But there were no pictures of the men who beat up the man in the wheelchair and stole his wheelchair, so I guess they were white supremacists. You must always assume that all crimes that are committed by people not shown by the vermin in the media are white supremacists. That's the only thing you can conclude, because there's no pictures. There have to be white supremacists who did it. Who else would do a thing like that? It has to be white supremacists doing that. All right, let's go to the New York Post. Lady Gaga's dog walker shot in front of her home. Pup stolen. Reveals startling update on Tiger Woods' crash. What a terrible... That car looks like a pile of garbage. I don't understand this. How did he turn over? Okay, let's assume he was speeding down that incline. The car looks very imbalanced to me. It's some Korean car that they gave him as a freebie to drive around in for promotion. I kind of think they're promotional campaign. Sorry. Look, I'm not laughing at it. This guy's a great guy, great golfer, but that I don't think it's going to be very good for promoting that Korean brand. Probe finds college student was not victim of racism for eating while black. Of course not. Smith college student was not victim of racism for eating while black. They let her in, and then she said she was singled out due to her race while eating in a lounge in 18. She couldn't fit in. She couldn't catch. Let's put it this way. They picked her because of her race to put her into Smith, okay, in a once elite college. But because she couldn't keep up with the courses, she screamed racism the first time she started to failing courses. Oumu Kanyuti, a rising soph at Smith, had claimed that all she did was be black when a janitor called security on her when he found her in a closed lounge in July 2018. But a 35-page investigation carried out by an outside law firm found no evidence of discrimination, the New York Times reported. The findings were reported in 2018, but not released or not reported widely. Can you believe this? The incident began when Kanuti went inside an empty cafeteria that was reserved for a summer camp program for young children. Since students were not supposed to use the area, cafeteria worker Jackie Blair reminded her of that fact, but then decided to drop the issue, the outlet reported. A janitor was in it. Listen to the story now. A janitor was in his 60s and had poor vision, then noticed a figure in the distance eating in a closed-off lounge area of the cafeteria. School guidance called for employees not to confront strangers on their own, so janitor notified security, blah, blah, blah. So, engaged in a polite conversation with the student who recorded the encounter on video and later posted it to Facebook. It's outrageous that some people question my being at Smith and my existence overall as a woman of color, Kanuti wrote on Facebook about the private all-woman school. College president Kathleen McCartney, of course, called Kanuti to apologize and placed the janitor on leave the following day. Of course, it turned out to be a hoax. But this is what's going on in America today. This is the real crime against humanity, isn't it? Can you believe this? This is it. Speaking of professors, Biden says he was a professor. He really wasn't. He was just given $1 million with few visits. That's all. A construction worker knocked unconscious after a pipe burst in a New Jersey college. Was that based on racism? Did the pipe burst because of race? I don't want to look into it. I want to look the other way. Let's see now. You heard about the cages, the kids in cages? Biden built them again. United Against Biden excluded major nonprofit launches effort to combat radical agenda to defend Trump's policies. Good luck. With Mitch McConnell, are you joking? Did you see that Mitch McConnell came out in favor of appointing this Garland to the Attorney General's office? Old Mitch, the turncoat, the wobbler, the gobbler. He already came out, supported this guy Garland. Now, Garland is a far left radical who Obama wanted to put on the Supreme Court. No comment from leading liberal women after Cuomo accused of sex harassment. Not one word from occasional Cortex, Hillary Clinton, or Kamala Harris. Not one word. Not one word. Meanwhile, New York Democrats have been calling for an investigation into allegations of sexual harassment against Cuomo. Governor Meatball is cooked. I don't see how he can survive this. What else is in the news? Let's look at let's go to the SF Gate since this morning and coffee and news of the day, and I haven't had any coffee. I may have to have some. Here's the SF Gate. This used to be a B-rated site. It's so bad, it's frightening. Here's a headline. I was so scared. 27-year-old drove Victorian to new address. What? I don't understand it. How can they even publish this? Longtime ghost signs of San Francisco, forgotten treasures hiding in... We have a crime wave out of control. We have a bum wave out of control. We have the most moronic, stupid mayor in history who still keeps the city closed down, even though they've gone from a red pier, purple pier, tier. The business, that's a ghost town. They're talking about garbage like this. 1 in 6 Gen Z adults are LGBT, and this number could continue to grow. Wow. Isn't that wonderful? I think that people should be required to become lesbian, gay, or bisexual in order to not get sued. San Francisco's oldest church is at risk of permanent closure. There's a church left in the city? Historic San Francisco landmark may close forever. It was the tallest building in the city. There's nothing in the site here that you can read. Nothing. SF prepares for move into red tier. What could open next week? Well, maybe they could open some homeless facilities and take them all out of the city. That would be the first thing they should open. You know, how many times have I told you that this disease first spread amongst the homeless? And you wouldn't want to listen to me. You wouldn't believe me. But okay, let's just move on. Capitol rioter texted X, called her a moron. She turned him in. They're still going on with the Capitol riot? Like that's the biggest thing on the earth? Okay, I'm through with them. There's nothing more to be said. It's not funny. It's not interesting. It's just boring. All right, let's look at the New York Daily News, which I don't open because you have to subscribe. Armed crooks break into, a nursing home. They make believe they're plumbers, con their way into a Bronx nursing home, beat and torture victims for 15 hours. No pictures of the perps. So they must be white supremacists. That's all we have to assume. Be on the lookout for white supremacists who broke into a Bronx nursing home, beat and tortured victims for 15 hours. Look for a white supremacist near you. Since there's no pictures, you have to look for them. No question about it. They must be the ones who did it. My friends, there's not much in the news, which honestly, I don't read it much anymore, to be frank with you. I only do this for the podcast because you want me to suffer for your sins. I'll go across the country now to the LA Times. Here we go. Again, it's so predictable. Column 1, a Santa Ana student's father faced deportation. Her work to free him helped send her to Harvard. Why not send him to Harvard? Instead of deporting him, send him to Harvard. He could major in something over at Harvard now, what it became. The Santa Ana high school student will study biology in the fall of 2021. Well, no, she's going to get a Nobel Prize just for going there. But first, she had to help her father get out of an immigration detention center. I think he should go to Harvard, too. That's what Harvard's become. Vaccination reopens lives to travel, sex, and peace of mind. Oh, okay, now the vaccination is the salvation of the human race. Tiger Woods' crash leads to review of road notorious for crashes. Why not review his driving history and not the road? Since 99.9% of the people that go down Hawthorne Boulevard heading into the LA basin don't crash, why do we assume it was the road and not the driver? Black Lives Matter LA launches a campaign against law enforcement unions. They want to disband the unions. So they want to disband the police unions, not disband this criminal organization, Black Lives Matter. Isn't that great? Again, LGBT, another one. A historic bill for LGBTQ rights, but will the pendulum swing again? Pay Equality Act a second time. Biden lifts Trump-era ban blocking most legal immigration to the U.S. That's just what we need, is more immigrants into the country. Here's another story in the LA Times about LGBTQ. It's 2 out of 3 stories are LGBTQ. With Biden's support, House makes new attempt at enshrining LGBTQ protections. Wow. okay, there's nothing here. I mean, these papers are so liberal, left, they're not liberal. They're so radical. They're like college LGBTQ newspapers. They've destroyed themselves with their bias, which is why you don't buy them anymore, which is why I'm forced to read them to you on Coffee and News of the Day.
The Savage Nation. It's Savage on Demand.
The last podcast was about the death of talk, where I took on so-called white privilege, white fragility, put out by the most racist bastards on the planet. I don't know how people take this in universities. I don't know how they take it. I mean, I don't know how white people sit there and listen to this garbage. When I was forced to go through diversity training in 1995 at a radio station in San Francisco, I got up and challenged these low-life, low IQ scumbags. I called them every name under the sun and walked out. I didn't care if they'd fire me. I didn't care. I was not going to listen to this racism put forward by these were low IQ diversity trainers. As a result of my standing up, they canceled diversity training at that radio station. Now I wake up, Coca-Cola slam for diversity training that urged workers to be less white. Can you believe what's going on in this country? Coca-Cola employees were urged to be less white as part of the company's alleged diversity training. But the material was yanked offline following a viral whistleblower post. The so-called Confronting Racism course was offered by the soft drink titan. Listen to what they said. In the U.S. and other Western nations, white people are socialized to feel that they are inherently superior because they are white, reads one of the slides. It was leaked by a whistleblower and posted on Twitter by a YouTube commentator, Carolyn Borisenko, who stood up to them. Another psychopathic racist slide suggests, quote, try to be less white, with tips including be less oppressive, listen, believe, and break with white solidarity. Do you know how racist this is? Do you understand that critical race theory is Marxism 101? Now, who's behind this? A fake sociologist wrote this crap in a university. It's now mandatory for employees at Coca-Cola and other places. Written by sociologist Robin DiAngelo?
The evidence that white people give for their lack of racism is very revealing to what we think racism is. And everything I do is to try to get us off the surface, which is all this all these narratives, and get under there to the underlying framework. Because despite all those narratives, I was taught to treat everyone the same, I don't see color, our outcomes haven't improved. By virtually every measure, there is racial inequality in this country, and by many measures, it's increasing, not decreasing.
She belongs in a mental hospital, in my opinion. Robin DiAngelo should be in a straitjacket being given old-line antipsychotic medication for hating her own race, in my opinion. This is what is going on. To be less white is to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less certain. Listen to this, less certain. Less defensive, less ignorant, more humble, listen, believe, break with apathy, break with white solidarity. Can you imagine telling black people to sit in a room and be told to be less black? Can you imagine telling Hispanic people be less Hispanic? Chinese people be less Asian? This is shocking. Coca-Cola denied that the training was mandatory for employees, according to Newsweek. But Borisenko told the outlet that multiple workers said it was, in fact, required. The training material was yanked offline after a viral whistleblower post. Okay, my friends, if you are subjected to this, here is what I suggest. Walk out and contact a lawyer because these companies need to be sued until they're broke. That's one story, but there are many others. That's just one. Did you see the story about the hunter of a giraffe in South Africa? She mutilates the giraffe after shooting the poor thing and holds up its heart and says, how much does a giraffe's heart weigh? My friends, listen to what's going on. The world's going crazy. It's going crazy. Also in the news this morning, MyPillow CEO losing sleep over millions in lost revenue after election fraud claims. Oh, I need coffee. He sure stepped into that pillow, didn't he? Cost him $65 million in revenue. MyPillow founder Mike Lindell says he has lost $65 million in revenue this year because of mass boycotts over his ongoing claims that the presidential election was stolen. He scoffed at claims made in a $1.3 billion lawsuit that his alleged big lie over election fraud was because of the lie that sells pillows. Now, he's being sued, as you know, by Dominion Voting Systems for accusing the company of stealing millions of votes and rigging the 2020 presidential election. So Dominion files a lawsuit seeking $1.3 billion for defamation. My friends, listen to me very carefully. If he cannot prove that Dominion altered or rigged the election, he's going to lose. There are defamation lawsuits in this country. Okay? People raise them and they win them and they lose them. The fact of the matter is, I don't really know what's true here. I do know that Lindell was frequently with the president, Trump, in 2020, during the time that the president disputed the outcome of the election. Lindell says, that's the MyPillow guy, I've been looking forward to them finally suing. I'd love to go to court tomorrow with Dominion. Lindell said that the expression, the big lie, is the big lie. He said they're the big lie. This is the third defamation lawsuit that Dominion has filed against its accusers. At a news conference, Dominion CEO John Pullo said it is by no means the last. Oh boy, this is getting bigger, isn't it? It's getting bigger. Did you see the HBO documentary about Woody Allen, that he was allegedly a child molester? I saw it. I had to turn it off. It made me nauseous. I don't know who to believe, but I'll be honest with you. Enough is enough with this Woody Allen attack by Mia Farrow. She's a nothing. She's a nobody. She's a zero. She's a talentless loser. And it looks to me like she's trying to ride Woody Allen's name again for another run at the money. That's how I see it. Now, even if you don't watch it on HBO, which I don't recommend, they didn't give the man a chance to talk until it was all done. For 2 years, they conspired with that stupid son of hers to say that he did this, he did that. 100 years ago, he did this, he did that. Why are they doing this to him at this point? Why would they do this to poor Woody Allen at this point? Why? Why? Follow the money. It's always the money. Always the money. Always the money. Well, I don't want to drag you into this story again, but you really owe it to yourself not to watch the Farrow versus Allen documentary. It's really sickening. Another news story. Meghan McCain doubles down on Fauci attack. What's she do now? What's this now? Meghan McCain on Tuesday doubled down on her attacks on Dr. Anthony Fauci. What a floozy that Fauci is. She accused him of putting people at risk with an intentional lie about masks when COVID-19 first ravaged New York City. She said he should be replaced with someone who understands science. You know, she's right. She's right. This guy has gone back and forth on many issues. Fauci is not a scientist anymore. Fauci is a politician. Fauci is a vaccine pusher. Fauci has been around far too long. Fauci should have been thrown out a long time ago, but I blame Donald Trump. Why did Donald Trump keep him? If he's such a fraud, why did he keep him? Tell me why. And he's still in power, this guy, since the 1980s? He's the smartest scientist on the planet? I don't think so. But there he is. So now somebody stood up to him. Top doctor under scrutiny after prescribing mixed messages on COVID-19, vaccines, and reopenings. Don't you get it yet? Fauci speaks out of both sides of his mouth. He is a politician. He's a liar. He's a mook. He's a bum. Meanwhile, what's going on in Texas? Very bad energy. Oh, my goodness. Oh, what happened to Ted Cruz with the Mexico trip? Boy, wow, what a story that was. Now, you may say, well, he had a right to leave Texas. It was not good. Sorry. You're the senator of a state. People are freezing around you. You jump on a plane and go to Mexico with your family. My friends, I'm not so sure it was smart. It could cost him a Senate seat because the enemies are circling. And there's another element to this whole Ted Cruz story. I got to tell you, it's called rumor mongering. I was in a department store the other day, and it was empty. Nobody was in it. And there were three men, if you want to call them men. You know, the type that work in department stores. There were three men, well-dressed, thin, good shape. And they were gossiping about, I didn't know what. I kind of eavesdropped for a minute walking by. I thought I heard the name Ted Cruz. So one snickers to the other. And one says, he left his dog in the house. And the dog, and the other one says, the dog froze to death, right? And the other one says, oh, yes, the dog froze to death. Well, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm not one to, talk to strangers. I went up to them and I took off the mask. I said, why don't you guys stop gossiping like a bunch of old ladies? I said, no, the dog was not left alone to die in the house. A bodyguard was there guarding the house, and the dog was taken care of. And no, the dog didn't die. Well, they stopped talking for 1 second. God knows what they said when I left. Cuomo admitted he wouldn't put his mother in a nursing home the same month he issued the COVID order. How do you like that? What else is going on? Oberlin professor of peace. Listen to this. A professor of peace called for the destruction of Israel in 1989 in a speech. Oberlin professor of peace. Former Iranian ambassador turned academic defended violent Palestinian intifada in 1989. No kidding. Oberlin College used to be a big deal in the 50s, the 60s. Oh, Oberlin. I'm going to Oberlin. Prince Philip hospitalized with infection. What can I say about that? Hasn't worked a day in his life. Everyone gets an infection. Airline pilot reports seeing fast-moving cylindrical object at 37,000 feet. Cylindrical object. Now the UFOs are in the air again. Pilot of American Airlines Flight from San Diego reported a close encounter with a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile about 37,000 feet. The incident involved Flight 2292 occurred last Sunday when the Airbus A320 was flying at 406 mph above a remote expanse west of Des Moines. Steve Douglas, the war zone, they heard the pilot's bizarre transmission while recording from his multiple scanners. In the call, the pilot is heard telling air traffic control in Albuquerque about a mysterious object. Quote, he says, do you have any targets up here? We just had something roll right over the top of us, he says. I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing, moving really fast right over the top of us, he adds. Well, what can I say? They report there's no military aircraft present. What can I say? This incident was similar to one that occurred in the same area almost 3 years ago when a Learjet and an airliner both had close encounters with an unidentified object. The pilot of the Learjet, who was flying for military contractor Phoenix Air, described the off-counter to local news outlets, according to a site called The Drive. U.S. Navy flyers also reported similar encounters off the eastern seaboard in the past several years, according to the outlet. Could it be a test missile? Could it be some kind of clandestine aircraft? It could be, couldn't it? Maybe the military's testing some kind of aircraft. Maybe the military had a missile that went off course. In October 2017, the war zone also reported that F-15s were scrambled to investigate an object that several airline crews reported over Northern California and Oregon. What do you make of this UFO business? I have a friend who's obsessed with it. What can I say? I don't have any clever comments about it. We don't know. And that's it. Here's another article on Woody Allen after read by Andrea Pizer of the New York Post. Andrea says, put me on Team Woody. Mia Farrow is full of it. I like Mia Farrow. Not. I think she's a talentless hack who seduced, what's his name? Frank Sinatra. No one even knew. You remember when she met Frank Sinatra, always going out with the Hollywood type of bimbo, the big breasts, right? The full blonde hair. All of a sudden, he's dating this Twiggy-like chick, Mia Farrow. Everyone go, wow, look at that, man. So HBO puts out a new docuseries called Allen versus Farrow. And she appears as prim and uptight as the state of Connecticut, says Andrea Pizer. And look, she's a spurned woman. He dumped her for a grown daughter, and so she never forgave him. And she sits up there like she's as clean as the driven snow, and her whole life work seems to be taking it out on Woody Allen. It's a scorched earth kind of documentary. Now, her daughter Dylan, who was supposedly brutalized by Woody Allen when she was 7 years old, is the narrator. But it seems to me that I agree with Andrea Pizer that Mia Farrow is exploiting her daughter Dylan, who is now 35. And I believe that Andrea is right, that she maimed his daughter mentally. She threw her under the Woody bus in a twisted effort to destroy the life, reputation, and career of her former husband, Woody Allen. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know. Molestation does occur. But it seems to me that she's milking this a little too much, right? On and on and on it goes from this talentless nobody, Mia Farrow. But the sad part to me is that Woody Allen, who is probably one of the most brilliant writers in film's history, one of the finest directors in the history of modern film, will have his career permanently destroyed by these allegations, whether they are true or false. That's the bottom line. That's what the Me Too movement is doing, destroying people. What else is in the news? Oh, God, more? There's more news? Can we do anything without Trump in it? They want to put this guy Garland on the Supreme Court. What a left-wing fanatic he is. What a left-wing radical he is. My God, putting him now. Where do they want to put him? Oh, in the Attorney General, sorry, not Supreme Court. Merrick Garland. He said the Portland riots weren't that bad. Merrick Garland said the Portland riots may not be domestic terrorism because the courthouse was closed. Are you listening to this psychopath? He was always a left-wing nutcase. They should never, ever appoint him as Attorney General. He is one of the most dangerous left-wing fanatics in the history of the Attorney Generalship. Breitbart says this, says that. He's not a moderate. He's a left-wing fanatic. You want him in the Attorney General's office? I don't. But okay, I don't know. Will he get in or not? Who knows? We'll have to see. He's a dangerous man. He will criminalize the Attorney General's office. And the only good news is that Judge Merrick Garland is not being considered for the Supreme Court, which is what Obama wanted. I don't know what kind of damage. Can he still do damage as Attorney General? Probably. Yeah, he'll go after every conservative like they're criminals. All right. I think let's go look at one more piece of news here today. I'll hold my nose, I'll gag, and I'll look at SF Gate. This used to be a fun site. It's so awful. There's nothing in it. Here's a lead story on the culture at SF Gate. Should you say queer or gay? A guide to evolving LGBTQ terminology. That's the most important thing in the world right now. Accidental gender reveal explosion kills expectant father in New York. What? What is this? A gender reveal explosion? How did that happen? How do you get killed at a gender reveal? To rig a small device to emit a pink or blue burst during the grand finale of a gender reveal party planned for later that evening. But the homemade device blew up, seriously injuring one and killing the other brother. Okay, what is a gender reveal party? I never heard of this. Oh, couples have elaborate stunts to share whether they're having a boy or a girl. I don't know. When I was young, you either got a pink blanket or a blue blanket. You didn't blow things up in your grandfather's closet. But okay, times they are changing.
The Savage Nation. It's savage, uncut, unfiltered, and raw.
So let me close with a positive story. Let's see, can I find a positive story? No. Go to michaelsavage.com. You'll see pictures of me with SF City Lights bookseller, founder, poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti dies at 101. I knew him fairly well many years ago, and all I said is aloha, Larry. I have nothing good or bad to say about him. He was just what he was. I could say things about him, but I don't want to speak ill of the dead. Let's leave it at that. Meanwhile, my dear friend, as you know today, Dr. Richard Kunin died. He was a pioneer in nutrition, as I told you today on today's podcast, and he had so many firsts in the field of nutrition, and I say that is a passing that is worthy of mention. Well, thank you very much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something from it. And I want to remind you of something that I think is important for you to know. We have over 280 Savage Nation podcast episodes available to you absolutely free. I'll say that again. You can go back into this vast library of over 280 episodes and listen to any one of them or several of them at your leisure. So you never have to be without the Savage Nation. Thank you very much for listening.